step behind the lens, and look beyond the boundaries of ordinary storytelling. Join us as we explore the defining moments in history, capturing the exact seconds that changed our world forever.
Hey, what are you doing on that porch? Whose package is that?
It's mine. I live here, sir.
No, you don't. A white family lives here. Don't lie to me, kid.
The name's on the box. Look, Elijah Turner. That's me.
Yeah? Shut up. You're carrying someone else's package.
Officer Mark Preston, a patrol officer with 8 years on the force and a documented history of racially biased, was driving through a residential neighborhood he thought he knew well when he saw a black 12-year-old boy standing on the porch of a house picking up a package and immediately assumed the black child was stealing from what Preston believed was a white family's home. Preston confronted Elijah aggressively, refused to believe him when he said he lived there, laughed when Elijah showed him the package with his own name on it, and accused the child of opening someone else's mail. When Elijah got scared and tried to run inside to his mother, Preston grabbed him, told him to shut up, and attempted to arrest him for theft. And when a neighbor came out and told Preston that Elijah actually lived there, Preston dismissed her, said he knew better. And when Elijah kept crying and struggling, Preston tasered the 12-year-old boy on his own front porch. What Officer Preston didn't know was that Elijah's mother, Rebecca Turner, was the state attorney for the county, that she would storm into the police station within the hour demanding her son's release and threatening everyone in the building, and that his decision to taser and arrest a child would result in his firing, criminal charges, and a $1.4 million settlement that would make national headlines. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe a 12-year-old boy should be able to pick up a package on his own front porch without being tasered by a cop, like this video and subscribe. Maple Grove Drive, on a Thursday afternoon in late spring, looked exactly the way suburban streets are supposed to look. Neat lawns, trees lining the sidewalks, kids' bikes left in driveways. The kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors, where delivery trucks came and went all day, and where a package sitting on a front porch was nothing unusual. Elijah Turner stood on his front porch at 4:32 p.m., right where he had been standing for the past 3 minutes, waiting for the delivery truck to pull away before he opened the door. He was 12 years old, a 7th grader at Roosevelt Middle School, and he had been tracking this package all week. It was a video game he had ordered with birthday money his grandmother had sent him last month, a new release he had been waiting for since it was announced 6 months ago. The delivery truck turned the corner and disappeared, and Elijah pushed open the front door, stepped out onto the porch, and saw the box sitting on the mat. He picked it up, turned it over to check the label, and smiled when he saw his name printed clearly across the top. Elijah Turner, 1247 Maple Grove Drive. He was already thinking about how fast he could get it set up and start playing when he heard the car door slam. Elijah looked up. A police cruiser had pulled up to the curb in front of his house, and a uniformed officer was getting out. Elijah didn't think much of it at first. Cops drove through the neighborhood all the time, and sometimes they stopped to talk to people or check on things. But this officer wasn't walking toward someone else's house. He was walking straight toward Elijah's porch, and the way he was walking, fast, purposeful, his hand already resting on his belt, made Elijah's stomach tighten. Officer Mark Preston was 36 years old with 8 years on the police force, and he had spent most of those 8 years working patrol in residential neighborhoods like this one. He thought he knew Maple Grove Drive. He had driven through it dozens of times, had responded to calls here, had seen the houses and the people who lived in them. And when he drove past 1247 Maple Grove Drive that afternoon and saw a black boy standing on the porch holding a package, his brain made a series of assumptions faster than his training should have allowed. Preston had a history. Over his 8 years on the force, he had been the subject of 5 formal complaints from black and Latino residents, all of them claiming he had made racially motivated stops, used excessive force, or treated them like criminals without cause. All 5 complaints had been filed, documented, and dismissed by supervisors who either didn't see the pattern or didn't care. The complaints sat in his personnel file like warning signs no one had bothered to read. Preston reached the porch and stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at Elijah with an expression that was already accusatory before he opened his mouth. "Hey kid, what the hell are you doing at that house?" Elijah blinked, caught completely off guard. "I live here." Preston's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. "Don't lie to me. I know a white family lives in this house, so I'm going to ask you one more time. What the hell are you doing here?" Elijah felt his heartbeat pick up. He didn't understand what was happening or why this officer was talking to him like this, but he knew enough to stay calm and answer clearly. "I do live here. This is my house. This is my package." He held the box up so Preston could see the label with his name printed on it. Preston looked at the package, read the name Elijah Turner, and then he did something Elijah would never forget. He laughed. Not a friendly laugh. Not an "oh, I made a mistake" laugh. A dismissive, condescending laugh that made it very clear he didn't believe a single word Elijah had just said. "You expect me to believe that's your name?" Elijah's voice was quieter now, confusion giving way to something closer to fear. "It is my name. It's a video game I ordered. I live here." Preston shook his head and started walking up the porch steps. "Opening someone else's package is a crime, kid. That's theft. Mail fraud. I'm going to have to detain you." Elijah's eyes went wide. "What?" "No, it's my package. I'm not lying." Preston reached the top step and moved toward Elijah, his hand now on his handcuffs. "Stop talking and turn around." And that was when Elijah did what any 12-year-old kid would do when a cop was coming at him, and he didn't understand why. He panicked. He turned toward the front door and ran, shouting at the top of his lungs for the one person he knew could fix this. "Mom! Mom!" Preston moved fast. He grabbed Elijah by the arm before he could reach the door, yanking him backward hard enough that Elijah stumbled and nearly dropped the package. Preston's grip was tight, his voice loud and angry. "Shut up! You're under arrest for trying to steal someone else's package." Elijah was crying now, his voice breaking as he tried to pull away. "It's mine! I live here! Mom!" Preston tightened his grip and started dragging Elijah toward the porch steps. "I said shut up!" "Let me go! I live here. The package has my name on it." Preston ignored him, focused on getting the kid off the porch and into the back of his cruiser before this turned into more of a scene than it already was. But Elijah wouldn't stop shouting, wouldn't stop struggling, and the noise was starting to draw attention. The front door of the house next door opened, and a woman stepped out onto her porch. Linda Hernandez was 48 years old, had lived at 1249 Maple Grove Drive for 10 years, and had watched Elijah grow up from the toddler next door into the kid who mowed her lawn every other Saturday. She saw Preston dragging Elijah off the porch, saw Elijah crying and struggling, and immediately pulled out her phone and started recording. "Officer, what are you doing? What's going on?" Preston turned toward her, still holding Elijah by the arm. His voice was loud and confident, like he was explaining something obvious to someone who didn't understand. "I caught him trying to steal a package from this house. He's claiming he lives here, but I know that's not true. Don't worry, ma'am. I have this under control." Linda's voice went sharp. "He's not claiming anything. He does live there. That's Elijah. Let him go." Preston looked at her like she had just said something ridiculous. "That's impossible. I know a white family lives in this house." Linda took a step forward, her phone still recording. "His mother is white. His father is black. That boy lives there. You need to let him go right now." Preston's expression didn't change. He dismissed her with a wave of his free hand. "Ma'am, go back inside. I know what I'm doing. I have this under control." Linda didn't go back inside. She stayed right where she was, recording everything, and her voice getting louder. "You're making a mistake. That's his house. That's his package. Let him go." Preston ignored her. He turned his attention back to Elijah, who was still crying, still struggling, still trying to pull away. Preston's patience was gone. His voice dropped into something colder and harder. "Stop struggling right now or I'm going to taser you." Elijah was 12 years old. He was terrified. He didn't understand what was happening or why this officer wouldn't listen to him, and he couldn't stop crying or struggling because every instinct in his body was screaming at him to get away. Preston pulled the taser off his belt and held it up where Elijah could see it. "Last warning, kid. Stop struggling." Elijah couldn't stop. He was too scared. His voice was breaking as he shouted again, "I live here. Please, Mom." And that was when Officer Mark Preston deployed the taser. The electrodes hit Elijah in the chest, and 50,000 volts of electricity shot through his 12-year-old body. Elijah's legs gave out immediately. He dropped to the porch floor, his body convulsing, unable to control his movements, unable to scream because his muscles had locked up and he couldn't breathe. Linda was screaming from her porch, "He's a child! Stop! Stop!" Preston didn't stop. He moved over Elijah's shaking body, flipped him onto his stomach, pulled his small arms behind his back, and locked handcuffs around his wrists. Elijah was still twitching from the taser, still crying, his face pressed against the porch wood. Preston grabbed Elijah by the arm and dragged him down the porch steps, across the front lawn, and toward his patrol car. Elijah's legs dragged behind him because he still couldn't control them. The package with his name on it was still sitting on the porch where it had fallen. Linda was still recording, still shouting, "That boy lives there. You just tasered a child on his own porch. I'm calling his mother." Preston opened the back door of his cruiser, shoved Elijah into the seat, slammed the door, and got into the driver's seat without saying another word. And as he drove away, Linda Hernandez stood on her porch with her phone in her hand, the video still recording, and dialed Rebecca Turner's number. Linda Hernandez stood on her porch with her phone pressed to her ear, her hands shaking as she watched Officer Mark Preston's cruiser disappear around the corner with Elijah in the back seat. The phone rang twice before Rebecca Turner answered. "Hello?" Linda's voice came out in a rush, tight with anger and fear. "Rebecca, it's Linda from next door. A cop just arrested Elijah. He tasered him on your front porch." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then Rebecca's voice came back, cold and precise, in a way that made Linda's skin prickle. "What did you just say?" Linda took a breath and forced herself to speak clearly. "A police officer pulled up while Elijah was picking up a package on your porch. He accused Elijah of stealing it. Elijah told him he lived there. He showed him the package with his name on it. The cop didn't believe him. I came out and told the cop that Elijah lives there, and the cop said that was impossible because he thought a white family lived in your house. Elijah got scared and tried to go inside, and the cop grabbed him. Then he tasered him, Rebecca. He tasered a 12-year-old boy on his own front porch. Then he handcuffed him and took him away." Rebecca's voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now that sounded like steel scraping against stone. "Where did he take him?" "I don't know. He just drove off, but I recorded the whole thing. I'm sending it to you right now." Linda pulled the phone away from her ear, opened the video she had just recorded, and sent it to Rebecca's number. Then she put the phone back to her ear and waited. On the other end of the line, Rebecca Turner stood in her office at the county courthouse, staring at her phone as the video loaded. She was 41 years old, the state attorney for the county, and she had spent the last 15 years of her life as a prosecutor. She had seen a lot of things in those 15 years. She had prosecuted violent crimes, white-collar crimes, and more than a few cases involving police misconduct. But nothing had ever prepared her for watching a video of her own son being tasered and dragged off his own front porch by a cop who refused to believe he lived there. The video played on her screen. She watched Officer Preston walk up to Elijah. She watched Elijah show him the package. She watched Preston laugh. She watched Elijah run for the door. She watched Preston grab him. She heard Elijah screaming for her. She heard Linda shouting that Elijah lived there. She watched Preston pull out the taser. She watched her son drop to the ground, his body convulsing. She watched Preston handcuff him. She watched Preston drag him to the car. Rebecca's hand tightened around the phone, and her voice came out quiet and deadly. "I'm going to the station. Right now." She ended the call, grabbed her jacket and her briefcase, and walked out of her office without saying a word to anyone. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove straight to the police station with a single thought running through her mind on repeat. He tasered my son, on his own porch, for picking up a package. Rebecca Turner was not someone who lost control easily. She had built her career on being calm, precise, and strategic. She knew how to walk into a courtroom and dismantle a defense attorney's argument piece by piece without raising her voice. She knew how to negotiate plea deals and how to stand in front of a jury and make them see exactly what she needed them to see. But right now, driving toward the police station with the video of her son being tasered still playing in her mind, she was not thinking like a prosecutor. She was thinking like a mother. She pulled into the parking lot of the station, got out of her car, and walked through the front doors with the kind of focused intensity that made people move out of her way without being asked. The desk sergeant looked up as she approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Rebecca's voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "Where is my son?" The desk sergeant blinked. "Ma'am, I'm going to need more information." "Who?" Rebecca cut him off. "Elijah Turner, 12 years old. Just brought in by one of your officers. Where is he?" The desk sergeant looked down at his computer screen, typed in the name, and his face went slightly pale when he saw the booking information. He looked back up at Rebecca, and his tone shifted into something more cautious. "Ma'am, if you'd like to have a seat, I can—" Rebecca leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped to something that was almost a whisper but somehow carried more force than shouting ever could. "I'm State Attorney Rebecca Turner. That's my son. And I want him released right now." The desk sergeant's eyes went wide. He stood up immediately. "I'll get the chief." Rebecca didn't move. She stood at the desk and waited. And within 2 minutes, the chief of police came out of his office looking like a man who had just been told his house was on fire. Chief Howard was 52 years old, had been with the department for 28 years, and had worked with Rebecca Turner on dozens of cases over the years. He knew exactly who she was and exactly how much power she had. And right now, standing in his own station looking at her face. He knew he had a very serious problem. "Mrs. Turner," he said carefully, "I understand there's been an incident involving your son. I want you to know—" Rebecca cut him off. "Where is he?" Chief Howard hesitated for just a second, and that second was too long. Rebecca's voice went cold. "Where is my son?" Chief Howard nodded quickly. "He's in a holding area. I'll have him brought out immediately." Rebecca's eyes didn't leave his face. "Uncuff him first." Chief Howard turned to the desk sergeant. "Bring him out, uncuffed." 3 minutes later, a door opened at the back of the station and Elijah walked out. His wrists were red where the handcuffs had been. His face was streaked with dried tears. His shirt had dirt on it from being dragged across the porch, and the moment he saw his mother, his face crumpled and he ran to her. Rebecca caught him and held him, and for a moment she didn't say anything. She just held her son and felt him shaking against her. Then she looked up at Chief Howard, and her voice was quiet and absolute. "Who arrested him?" "Officer Mark Preston." "Where is he?" "He's out on patrol." Rebecca's expression didn't change. "Call him in. I want his badge. I want his body cam footage. I want every report related to this arrest on my desk within the hour, and I want him fired." Chief Howard opened his mouth to respond, but Rebecca wasn't finished. "Your officer tasered my 12-year-old son on his own front porch for picking up a package with his name on it. He accused him of theft. He ignored a witness who told him Elijah lived there. He used a taser on a child, and then he brought him here and put him in a holding cell like a criminal." She paused, and when she spoke again, every word was deliberate. "I'm not just his mother. I'm the state attorney, and I'm going to make sure Officer Preston never wears a badge again." Rebecca Turner walked out of the police station with Elijah's hand in hers, and the first thing she did when they got to the car was call her attorney. Not the county's attorney, not someone from her office. Her personal attorney, Marcus Reed, who had handled civil rights cases for 20 years and had a reputation for taking on police departments and winning. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Rebecca, what's wrong?" Rebecca's voice was steady, but there was an edge underneath it that Marcus had never heard before. "A cop just tasered my son on our front porch and arrested him for trying to steal his own package. I need you to file a federal lawsuit. Today." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Tell me everything." Rebecca told him. Every detail. The package. The confrontation. Preston refusing to believe Elijah lived there. The neighbor confirming it. Preston dismissing her. Elijah running. Preston grabbing him. The taser. The handcuffs. The arrest. And then she told him the part that made Marcus go completely silent. "I'm the state attorney, Marcus. He tasered the son of the state attorney, and he did it on camera." Marcus's voice came back sharp and focused. "Send me everything you have. The neighbor's video, the body cam footage once you get it, witness statements, medical records if Elijah needs to be checked. I'll have the complaint drafted by tonight." Rebecca ended the call and drove Elijah home. When they got there, Linda was still standing on her porch, and she came over immediately with her phone in her hand. "I sent you the video," Linda said quietly, "but I have the original file. Whatever you need, Rebecca. Whatever you need." Rebecca nodded. "Thank you, Linda. I'm going to need you to give a formal statement, and I'm going to need that video as evidence." "You'll have it. All of it." Rebecca took Elijah inside, sat him down in the living room, and checked him over. The taser marks were still visible on his chest where the probes had hit him. 2 small red wounds that would leave scars. His wrists had deep bruises from the handcuffs. He was still shaking. He hadn't said more than a few words since they left the station. Rebecca called their family doctor and scheduled an appointment for the next morning to document the injuries. Then she sat beside Elijah on the couch and pulled him close. "I'm going to fix this," she said quietly. "I promise you, Elijah. I'm going to fix this." Elijah looked up at her, his voice small and broken. "Why didn't he believe me, Mom? I showed him the package. I told him I lived here. Why didn't he believe me?" Rebecca didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 12-year-old, so she just held him and let him cry. By that evening, the video Linda had recorded was already starting to spread. Linda had sent it to Rebecca, but she had also sent it to 3 local news stations because she wanted people to see what had happened. By 8 p.m., it was on the evening news. By 10 p.m., it was on social media. By midnight, it had been viewed over 5 million times. The footage was brutal and undeniable. It showed everything. Preston approaching Elijah. Elijah showing him the package. Preston laughing. Elijah running. Preston grabbing him. Linda shouting that Elijah lived there. Preston dismissing her. Preston pulling out the taser. Elijah dropping to the ground. Preston handcuffing a child. Preston dragging him to the car. And the audio was even worse. Elijah's voice, high and scared, screaming for his mother. Linda's voice, desperate and angry, telling Preston he was making a mistake. And Preston's voice, cold and certain, telling a 12-year-old to shut up. The Charlotte Police Department tried to get ahead of the story by releasing a statement late that night calling the incident under investigation and promising a thorough review. But it was too late. The video was everywhere, and people were already demanding answers. By the next morning, Officer Mark Preston's name was trending on every social platform. His face was being shared alongside the video. People were finding his social media accounts, his work history, his disciplinary record, and what they found made the situation even worse. Preston had 5 prior complaints on his record. All 5 involved Black or Latino residents. All 5 claimed he had used excessive force or made racially biased stops. All 5 had been investigated and dismissed by the department. The pattern was undeniable, and it had been sitting in his personnel file the entire time. The media picked up on it immediately. Headlines started appearing. Officer with history of racial bias tasers 12-year-old on his own porch. Child arrested for picking up package. Mother is state attorney. Bodycam footage shows cop laughing at black child's explanation. Rebecca held a press conference 2 days after the incident. She stood at a podium with Elijah beside her, and she spoke with the calm, measured precision of someone who had spent years in courtrooms but was now speaking as a mother who had watched her son be assaulted. My son was tasered on his own front porch for the crime of being black. He showed Officer Preston his package. He told Officer Preston he lived there. A neighbor confirmed it. None of it mattered. Officer Preston had already decided my son was a criminal, and no amount of evidence was going to change his mind. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made every reporter in the room go silent. This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern. Officer Preston has 5 complaints on his record. 5 times Black and Latino residents told the department that he was targeting them. 5 times the department dismissed those complaints, and now, because no one held him accountable, my 12-year-old son has taser burns on his chest and bruises on his wrists from being handcuffed on his own front porch. Rebecca looked directly into the cameras. I am the state attorney for this county. I have prosecuted cases involving police misconduct before, but I have recused myself from this case because I am not just a prosecutor right now. I am a mother, and I will not stop until Officer Mark Preston is held accountable for what he did to my son. She stepped back from the podium, and the room erupted with questions. But Rebecca didn't answer them. She took Elijah's hand and walked out, leaving the press conference with one final statement that would be replayed on every news station for the next week. A badge is not permission to ignore the truth, and my son deserves justice. By the end of that day, the Charlotte Police Department had placed Officer Mark Preston on administrative leave. By the end of the week, criminal charges were being filed, and by the end of the month, Marcus Reed had filed a federal civil rights lawsuit seeking $1.4 million in damages. Officer Mark Preston's career was over. His reputation was destroyed, and his name would be permanently attached to one of the most widely condemned examples of police violence against a child ever caught on camera. The video of Officer Mark Preston tasering 12-year-old Elijah Turner on his own front porch went viral in a way that few stories ever do. Within a week, it had been viewed over 40 million times across every platform. The image that spread everywhere was a still frame from Linda Hernandez's recording. Elijah on the ground, his small body convulsing from the taser, his hands reaching out and Preston standing over him with the taser still in his hand. The public outrage was immediate and overwhelming. Protests formed outside the Charlotte Police Department within 48 hours. Parents brought their children and held signs that read, "He was 12, and picking up a package is not a crime." The hashtag Justice for Elijah trended nationally for 2 weeks straight. Celebrities, activists, and politicians all shared the video and demanded accountability. Officer Mark Preston was placed on administrative leave within 72 hours of the incident. The internal affairs investigation moved faster than any investigation in the department's history because the evidence was impossible to ignore. Preston's body cam footage showed everything from his perspective. Him seeing Elijah, making the assumption immediately, confronting him aggressively, laughing when Elijah showed him the package, grabbing him when he tried to run, ignoring Linda's confirmation that Elijah lived there, and deploying the taser on a 12-year-old child who was crying and begging to be let go. The investigation also pulled Preston's complete personnel file, and what they found confirmed what everyone already suspected. Over his 8 years on the force, Preston had been the subject of 5 formal complaints from Black and Latino residents. All 5 complaints alleged racially biased stops, excessive force, or treating innocent people like criminals. All 5 complaints had been investigated and dismissed with minimal consequences. The department had the pattern documented in black and white, and they had done nothing to stop it. 3 weeks after the incident, Officer Mark Preston was terminated. But that wasn't the end of it. Criminal charges were filed against him by a special prosecutor brought in from outside the county. The charges included assault on a minor, excessive use of force, false imprisonment, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Preston's criminal trial took place 6 months later, and the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 3 years of probation. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. At 36 years old, his career was over, and his name would be forever tied to one of the most egregious examples of police violence against a child ever recorded. Rebecca Turner's federal civil rights lawsuit was filed 2 weeks after the incident. The lawsuit named Officer Preston and the Charlotte Police Department as defendants and sought $1.4 million in damages for excessive force, unlawful detention, assault, and battery on a minor, violation of constitutional rights, and deliberate indifference to a pattern of misconduct. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence. Bodycam footage, neighbor video, witness statements, medical records documenting Elijah's injuries, and Preston's personnel file showing their ignored complaints, and made the decision to settle rather than go to trial. They knew that no jury would side with a police officer who had tasered a 12-year-old child on his own porch for picking up a package with his own name on it. The settlement was finalized for the full $1.4 million, one of the largest settlements involving a minor in the state's history. Rebecca used a portion of the settlement to establish the Elijah Turner Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal support and advocacy for children who experience police violence or racial profiling. The foundation also funds bias training programs and works with communities to implement police accountability measures. The Charlotte Police Department was forced to implement sweeping reforms as part of the settlement agreement. All officers were required to complete mandatory training on implicit bias, de-escalation techniques, and interactions with minors. A new policy was established banning the use of tasers on children under 14 except in life-threatening situations. An independent civilian oversight board was created to review all use-of-force incidents and complaints of racial profiling. Bodycam footage was now audited quarterly by an outside agency to identify patterns of biased behavior before they escalated into violence. 4 other officers with complaint histories similar to Preston's were quietly removed from patrol duties and placed on administrative assignments pending review. 5 years later, Elijah Turner is 17 years old. He still has the scars on his chest from where the taser probes hit him. He spent 2 years in therapy working through the trauma of being assaulted by a police officer on his own front porch. He has become an advocate for police reform and has spoken at city council meetings, state legislative hearings, and national conferences about the need for accountability and the dangers of racial profiling. He wants to study law in college and follow in his mother's footsteps. Officer Mark Preston served his full sentence and was released on probation. He has not been able to find stable employment. Background checks always reveal his conviction for assaulting a child. His name is still the first result when you search for examples of police violence against minors. He lives in a different state now, but the video follows him everywhere. The case became a landmark example used in police training programs across the country. It is shown in academies and reform workshops as a clear demonstration of what happens when officers operate on assumptions instead of facts, when departments ignore warning signs, and when bias is allowed to override judgment and humanity. The lesson was expensive, public, and permanent. A 12-year-old boy should never be tasered for picking up a package on his own porch. A badge does not grant permission to ignore the truth standing right in front of you. And racial profiling has a cost. It costs careers, it costs millions of dollars, and most importantly, it costs children their sense of safety in the world. If you believe a child should be able to stand on his own porch without being tasered by a cop who refused to listen, share this story. What reforms do you think every police department needs to protect children from this kind of violence? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story reminded you that assumptions destroy lives and children deserve better, subscribe, because we're not stopping until every child can pick up a package without the fear. Asterisk.
Every historical record holds a profound story waiting to be carefully uncovered. Every story we explore is a deliberate step closer to the ultimate truth. Thank you for joining us on this vital journey of discovery today.